It's nice to see your face again. It's like it's so nice to look at your face, you know? It's
Oh,
like a
back at you.
puppy.
Yeah.
It's like a puppy though. It's like so cute and like so friendly. You just want to like
I
pinch it or
feel
squeeze
I
it or something.
yeah, I feel like you and I both have that like smiley kind of, people, even people we've talked about this before, people will just like approach us. We're that kind of, it's like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
if people, random people asking me like directions or just kind of where to go, and we bring that, it's the positive vibes as well.
Did you notice how I'm growing a bit of a beard?
I was gonna say that. Yeah.
You
I like
like it?
Yeah, I do. Have you like I don't think I've seen you with facial hair before, ever. It's always like a clean shave.
I know. I feel like that's more my look,
Yeah.
but I decided to like leave it a little bit, see what happens. But yeah, then it gets a bit itchy and then I'll shave it or it looks a bit patchy. Like it doesn't look as nice as yours, you know?
Well, it will be itchy for a couple days. That's always at the beginning, but then it stops. So like you gotta like wait it out a bit.
I now have a ring light.
Yeah.
Last time we were talking about this on the podcast, and I was the only one without some kind of light. So now I have one, and let's look at the difference here. Okay, ready? So this is with it. This is without it.
That's a big difference.
And then this is like that. This is warmer.
Oh, there's the warm side. Yeah.
I mean, the warmer is nicer on my eyes, but I definitely think the bright makes it pop, you know? Welcome to another episode of Is This Adulthood? I'm Ryan Durgy.
And I'm Taylor Blixt.
And Ruby is not with us this episode.
I know. We're going to miss her for sure. She said to say hey out there to all of her fans and all those potential men in her life. So doing that for her.
Maybe she's on a date. No, she can't be on a date because COVID,
Yeah, that's right.
but she's not here right now, but she'll be back. And we have a very exciting topic to talk about today. We're going to get right into it. We have a lot to cover. And today's topic is going to be about how sexuality could be on a spectrum. And it's likely not just straight, bi, gay, right? There's a lot of places that people can fall along this spectrum. And we're going to go right into it because, people, I just ask that people are open-minded with this topic. You know, it doesn't mean that you can't be completely straight. It doesn't mean you can't be completely gay. Like I would consider myself completely gay, but I do think there's a lot of people out there that may be a little bit past those points, and maybe, open-minded to experimenting or open-minded to other types of relationships with different people that maybe they're not usually open to. And I have some stories about that. And Taylor has some data to back up this sexuality on a spectrum. So I'll pass it over to Taylor for a little bit more on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of history just in terms of even research coming out over, the last 50 years or so. But I think in general with society, with anything, not only sexuality, but putting things in boxes, we really like to do that and keep it nice and neat, but it really stops us from being open-minded. And I agree with you that, when discussing this topic or even thinking about it yourself, to come at it with no judgment, open-mindedness. And there is different theories about, with spectrum being on a line, but there's a lot of people that it's more of a circle where it can be
Oh,
evolving over time. There can be, in your past, present, and then even your ideal identity. It can really mix up over time. And so when we tend to put things in a box, I think it prevents people from exploring that or even maybe being true to themselves. So, it's good to kind of be open, and hopefully by talking about this topic, having people think and, not passing judgment to maybe someone in their life that could be on that journey and exploring their own sexuality. But yeah, kind of bring it back to you. I know you have some stories and just some interesting things about this. I know we've talked about this, when we're having those wings and the beer back pre-pandemic. Just fun conversations, but I'm interested to hear your stories. I'll kind of give my intake along the way, but I'll send it back to you, and maybe you start off with a story or two, or kind of your thoughts on everything.
Well, I just think it's interesting because I feel like society promotes women experimenting, whether it's, oh, like make out in the bar or, at a party. And there's all kinds of, the idea of patriarchy and the the men's I can't remember what it's called, but basically the view from a man's perspective, right? Whether that's in media or wherever, but that's a whole other topic. But what I'm saying is that that's kind of normalized. Whereas I don't think at this point, maybe it's different with the younger generation, but with me growing up, I don't think that that was as normalized or accepted with two men maybe making out at a party or a bar or something like that, right? So I think the fact that it's kind of accepted with two women, for example, means that there may be some people that are open to experimenting that then do it through something like that, and it's accepted and they can explore their sexuality, and maybe it could lead to more relationships with women, maybe it can lead to more relationships with men. Maybe it can lead to a bit of both, or dating other people, or being pansexual. There's so many different options, but I feel as though there's a lot of men that maybe fall along that spectrum, whether it's a line or a circle, and they may be more, maybe they're mostly straight, but there's a little bit of curiosity and there's a little bit of openness, but they may never experiment that because it's not as I guess you could say accepted, or they may be worried what other people think, or they may experiment and not talk about it, which means that, and that's up to them. But by not talking about it, people may think that it doesn't happen. And there could be other people that are maybe struggling with their sexuality that don't identify, with quote unquote gay culture, right? Like openly being gay and whatever. Maybe they more identify with more, um, heterosexual culture, whatever that may be. And because the straight men who have experimented aren't talking about it, people do it in secret, or they don't do it ever because they don't think it's happening, or they don't think that they're going to be accepted, or there's just so much to unpack here. And I think that the main thing is that I feel as though we need to be more open-minded rather than just putting labels on people. And I do think labels can help as far as like, ad- asking someone once you get to know them, whether they're gay or bi or straight or whatever that may be, because you may want to figure out if there's some kind of attraction there. Is this going to go anywhere? For sure. I'm not going to say let's eliminate all labels, but I'm just saying that because someone chooses to experiment or um, trying to figure out who they are, what they're attracted to, and maybe are usually with women, but then maybe they're with men from a male perspective, or a woman who's usually with men, but then sometimes with women. I think that we need to be more open-minded as a society to let them figure out who they are. And that could be at any stage of life. It could come at a later point where they're 40s or 50s, and people may be like, well, you've always dated men, or you were married to a man for X amount of years, or you have kids. Same with men. And I have stories. I've been with men who are older that have kids, who identify as bi now, but to everyone else in their life, they're probably like, oh well, unless he's open about it, oh, he has kids, or he was married, so he's straight. Meanwhile, they don't know that like actually he identifies, at least what he told me, was bi. So that's just one example, but I feel as though we're too quick to judge and too quick to label people. And I think that by putting people in a box or taking them out of that box based off of one experiment, or sorry, or one experience, not experiment, one experience, I don't think that's really fair.
There's that masculine toxicity that exists, and in terms of seeing two women at a bar making out, people kind of may accept that more, that they're experimenting, because we tend to live in a very masculine oriented culture, and I think that's more in the past, and we're evolving a bit to be able to accept both masculine and feminine characteristics in anyone. And before, if you were a male gender, or that's how you identified, you would be assumed to have to carry those masculine characteristics. And that really makes people kind of put themselves in boxes. And like the story you brought up about an older man that has children, he may have felt pressured by the people around him, that societal pressure of, having to be with a female gender partner and then having those kids. But as they grow up and they're, introduced to more open-minded culture, which is what we're, moving towards, hopefully, it allows them to be more true to themselves. And I'm sure many viewers, or if you haven't heard about Kinsey scale, but that's brought up when you kind of put it on an XY axis of heterosexuality and homosexuality, and people can kind of be anywhere within that. And I think looking along those lines, it kind of allows us to understand that, you can identify as heterosexual, but there may be some times where you have interests or have had thoughts about, being with the same gender. And I think that might be maybe looked down upon by some people. And I think it's important to kind of keep that open-mindedness that,
Yeah.
people can be along that scale, and they may experiment a bit, but that shouldn't put them within a box. And, we're
Hmm.
kind of too quick to do that a lot of the time.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it brings up the topic that I've talked to women that have told me that they wouldn't date a bi guy. I think I may have talked about this on the podcast before, but yeah, it happens all the time. Like, they're like, I wouldn't date a bi guy.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because then I'm sure if you talk to a lot of men, they would have no problem with dating a bisexual woman. And I mean, of course, like, I'm assuming a bit, but I have experienced that with male friends that, they don't mind if their girlfriend makes out with another girl. And like you're saying, there may be girls that they would mind if their boyfriend were to make out with another guy. So that in itself kind of shows that culture that exists.
I've been with guys where, like, it was the first time they had ever been with another guy, and mostly they've dated women, and then they dated women afterwards. And I don't know whether they're open with other people about the fact that they had been with a guy, being me. That's up to them. But I know firsthand that, like, they identify as straight, maybe curious, and things happened. And, you know, that's that's something where I feel like, because it's not really talked about openly, people may just assume that if that person was like, oh, well, I've been with a guy, that he's gay. That's what they think, is that, oh, well, he's gay. But no, actually, maybe he was straight but curious and wanting to, see how that would go. Maybe they were just attracted to another person. The fact that they were male, they were a guy, like, you know what I mean? Whereas, like, they may usually date women and they may continue to date women afterwards. But I think so much of the time, because of that one experience, maybe with a guy or something like that, if they were open about that, I think automatically they're labeled. Whereas, like, there's gay guys that have been with women before, and then they come out as gay, and no one says, oh, well, you were with women before, so you're straight, right? People don't do it the other way around, which I find interesting. And then I know at least one gay guy that has has been curious about hooking up with, or at least actually I think two gay guys who are openly gay, and they were curious about hooking up with a woman, or hooking up and having intercourse where it was with, I don't know if I could say this on the podcast, but with a vagina rather than with something else. And so that's another side of it, right? Like,
Mhm.
that's like a gay man who's open about it, who is actually curious about getting with a woman. So that's the thing, where that just shows me, at least based off people that I've talked to, sexuality really is a spectrum, and you can fall all along the line. Whether it's a Kinsey scale, or I know, like, you looked into and you found something where it was a circle. People can fall all along it. And I think it's more society that puts labels on people. And I think especially with men, since they maybe don't always talk about it, we think that it doesn't happen, but it does.
Yeah, and to kind of clarify what I meant by a circle, because it was talking about how, in terms of a spectrum, we think of a linear line. Whenever we talk about a spectrum in any aspect, But doing that in terms of thinking about a linear line, it kind of stops us from being able to move along that. Where when they brought up just the idea of a circle about in terms of the evolving state of your sexual identity, and that you can start one place in terms of being only heterosexual, and then you could maybe move towards the more bisexual, but you can go back or forward, and it's ever evolving. And I think, that's the whole point, is that there is this evolving spectrum that can occur, and we can't just label someone based off of one experience that, okay, now they fall way over on this end of the spectrum.
Yes.
And I think, because we tend to do that, like you said, they're not open about these experiences. They aren't really sharing with their close friends or family because, maybe they don't want to be labeled as one identity rather than the other. But I don't think we need to be afraid about that, and talking about it, kind of reducing that stigma of it's okay to experiment. And also, when you do, for instance, have an experience with gender that you don't usually have an experience with, then that doesn't mean 100% now you're bisexual or homosexual or heterosexual. And it's interesting how you bring up the fact that even people in the homosexual community, if they want to experiment and be more of a bisexual or heterosexual, they want to keep that in the closet and not talk about it to the same extent that a heterosexual may not want to a heterosexual may not want to express their homosexual tendencies. So it's from both sides, and it's interesting that that occurs. And I think it's because we don't want to talk about it, or we think we have to put people in boxes. And that's not fair to maybe what we are as humans. And that's what a lot of research shows, is that people can fall along and evolve along that spectrum. So if that's our natural tendencies, we should be open and non-judgmental towards that.
Have you ever known anyone in your life who has opened up to you about anything like this?
Well, and I think when I went to university, definitely being more engaged with the LGBTQ community, we went to Western University. Get Real, if people know about that program, that actually started from a Western alum, but I wasn't really exposed to it too much in high school. But I remember when I was a second year leader, first year that I talked to came from a town that was a smaller town, not as well accepted. And only when he got to a more embracing, accepting community, in university, he was able to come out and identify as homosexual. But it's really not accepted by his family or his hometown. So he had to hide that. But when you're able to be in an environment that's more opening and accepting, then you're able to maybe express what you truly feel. And I think that's great. I think that's something that is very important. But yeah, it's definitely, I know when I was in high school, I was more ignorant about it. And I'll be honest with that. It's just I wasn't exposed to it as much. And, over the last 10 years or so, there's been a lot of evolution in terms of the accepting, talking about it in terms of society. And I think that's important. And we still have a long way to go. But, talking about it being on a spectrum is kind of like a start. And that, when you do, and talking about it on a spectrum is a place to start. And if you are to think of yourself as maybe not being fully heterosexual or homosexual, like it's okay to kind of wander along that spectrum. And it doesn't mean that you are now all of a sudden need to be labeled as something else. And yeah, it's interesting because we really tend to, like we said, put things in boxes. And sometimes that's not fair and doesn't allow us to express who we are.
And I think the other side of it too is that there's celebrities out there that aren't open about their sexuality too. And I
Yeah.
think that that's a whole other topic, because whether they think that, oh, well, then, maybe that will hurt their career, or it will hurt, the amount of money they're making, right? Like maybe they're idolized by, for example, a bunch of women. And, a bunch of women go and buy their stuff and go to their concerts and listen to their music because they're like, I want to marry him, or I want to be with him. And maybe they're worried that if they come out, that those women may view them differently. And like I was saying, like I even know women in my life who have said that they wouldn't date a bi man.
And it definitely, it comes from the top in terms of the people we idolize, in terms of the Hollywood stars. And when they become more open and are able to, express themselves, then it kind of gives other people the courage to, okay, maybe I can talk about this more too. But, you are right, where, there's a lot of kind of ambiguity sometimes, and they may not be fully honest, and it makes people speculate. And, it would be better if we could just kind of talk about it more so there wasn't speculation.
If someone is curious and they explore that, I think people need to realize that just because you explore something doesn't mean that that's who you are. And I think that that's maybe what some people fear, is that, maybe they have some attractions to someone of the same sex, just for an example, and they've
Hmm.
never experienced that before. Maybe this is someone that they just became attracted to, they got to know, and they're just like, wow, I kind of want to explore that. But then maybe worried that, well, my whole life I've been straight. What does this make me, right? And I think that it's important to remember that because you have an experience that may be different from other experiences, that doesn't define who you are, right? I think you define who you are. You decide what you're attracted to, how you identify, right? And it's based off of feelings. It's based off of you knowing yourself. But I think you have to remember that, right? Just like I talked about how I've known gay men who are totally out as gay, who are curious about hooking up with women. In that same breath, I've also known straight men who are curious about hooking up with guys, and maybe have, or maybe they've done something with a friend and they've opened up to me about it, but maybe they've never opened up to other people about it, right? And so I think that a lot of that happens. So just know, anyone who's listening or watching that can identify with that, that you're not alone, that those feelings are okay, and that because you are feeling those things, or because you want to experience something different than what you're used to, or because you want to, maybe quote unquote experiment or try something new, that doesn't define who you are. It could end up changing how you identify. It may be something where you're like, wow, like that feels more right to me. That feels more natural. Totally, that could happen. But just know going into that, or if you're feeling that way at any age, right? You could be 45 and feeling that way. It could be a housewife who is now attracted to a woman that she met in her life, right? Like that can happen, and that's okay. And it's okay to be open to change as well. And that may never happen to some people, right? Like you may just know that you're straight, or you may just know that you're gay, and that's who you are. That's how you identify, and you're happy with it. But I'm just saying that I think there's a lot of people that aren't necessarily one or the other. And those people we don't talk about enough.
Yeah, because we don't talk about sexuality being on a spectrum. We
It's
put
true.
identities on it, and it does start, even at a young age. Like you said, there's men that wait until their 50s to, actually be truly who they are. If anyone has watched the Netflix series Grace and Frankie, uh, oh, you haven't? Okay,
No,
interesting.
I
But
haven't.
I know it's Martin Sheen, so Charlie Sheen's dad, and I forget the other actor, but they're both like in their 70s, and it's two couples, a man and a woman, and a man and a woman that were really good friends, and the two men actually divorce the wives and become married and identify
Oh,
as gay, and and then Grace and Frankie are the two wives. And they're like best friends and how they're kind of coping with it. But that was something that come out in the last couple of years, and that's kind of showing men that even in their 70s, can occur. And probably because when they were younger, 50 years ago, it definitely wasn't accepted, it wasn't talked about at all. And I think now it's really cool to see parents being more accepting, more open to letting their kids, letting their young son who's 6 years old wear a dress, wear
Mhm.
some makeup,
Yeah.
and not ridicule them for it. And I'm not a teacher. I don't work in schools or anything, but I've heard about a lot of school programs being more open in terms of the sex ed courses, talking about homosexual parents, and being more inclusive about the different genders, the different identities, the fact that because you have a certain physical characteristic, that doesn't mean that you will identify as that gender that is similar to that characteristic. So it starts, with teaching children and the next generation coming up. So it's important to keep that open mind. And it's easy to kind of accept society, accept those boxes, and then you're going to portray that on your children. So keeping a more open mind can allow for the next generation and allow for uh, continue evolving of people being more open-minded and
Exactly.
talking about it. So there's both sides, and I think it's great when parents are able to let their kids explore it themselves, and not identify them, and let them discover it for themselves. And if they want to have pink in their room and they're a boy, that's great. Like, that's their favorite color, let them do it. Or likewise, a more masculine color for a female's room, and it's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong about it. So it's just
Yeah.
about being more open.
100%. And whoever decided what's a masculine and what's a feminine color, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, that's a whole other topic, but it's true. It's
Yeah,
like one
no,
of those things,
100%.
just let your child or let your friends in your life or let your family just be who they are and trust that they'll figure it out on their own. Don't try to pressure people. When I was still figuring out, being gay, even though I knew from a young age, I still had to accept it myself.
Mm,
And, there's definitely people that would chime in or think a certain way or just assume a certain thing. And I mean, I guess they were right because I ended up coming out as gay, but it's not helpful when other people are trying to put labels on you. And I don't think that it's fair. It's like, let the person figure out on their own. They will. And, you want to hope that they'll, once they accept it, that they'll be able to live a life where they can be true to themselves, because sometimes people accept it, but they aren't openly themselves, which is a whole other topic. And it's quite sad, but just trust that your friends, your family, your children, whatever, let them be themselves and just support them. Right. And I think that that's the same with even being in a relationship. If you're in a relationship with someone that wants to maybe experiment or is open about some of their, sexual feelings towards maybe the same sex or something like that, be open to them as far as listening to them. Maybe it's not your thing. Maybe things won't work out in the long run, but be that support system rather than shutting them down. And I'm glad that we're bringing this topic to the podcast. And I feel like, this could be like a 5-part series. There's so much to unpack here, but I think that, we did a good job at talking about the main thing where all this comes down to, which is acceptance, not necessarily putting people in boxes and labeling them based off of experiences, and letting them figure out who they are. And I think that we need to be more open-minded to people sharing their stories without feeling judged or put in a box.
yeah, I think it's a really important topic, and it's interesting how it's 2021, but you can and everyone, the whole classic, oh, it's 2020, you can't say that. Uh, but it's interesting that even though it is 2021, there still seems to be such a big notion of needing to put labels on things. And
Hmm.
we can think we're more and more progressive, and that's true. But there's so much within the culture, the politics, a lot of just inner beliefs that aren't expressed, that are very they label things and they just don't accept. So it's important to have this conversation, even if people think, oh, but we are progressive more in 2021. It's like, that may be so compared to 10 years ago, but it's still, there's a lot of room for it to grow.
Oh
There's
yeah.
still, in terms of that accepting. And you know, we always just want, especially I know we talk on the podcast about people just kind of expressing themselves, being themselves, accepting all that, those things. Like this is a big aspect to it that really isn't talked about enough. So it's good we could have this conversation, and hopefully some viewers, maybe not even for themselves, but friends in their lives that, you know, may be struggling with something along these lines, like to be able to open up and be like, hey, if you ever want to talk to me about it, you know, I'm here. And just being open to being that ear for people that may not talk about it ever. And it's important to really dig deep and find who you are, as well as, you know, being true to yourself. So it's always good talking to you, Ryan, and I think this was a good topic. I'm glad we got to talk about it.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. Thanks for being open to discuss it too, and doing some more of the research into the topic as well. And I'm glad that we could talk about this. And yeah, that's the main message from today: is just be true to yourself, and everything else will fall into place. And I hope that society will come to a place where they're more accepting of people being true to themselves. But even in the meantime, just do it anyways. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you want to follow Is This Adulthood on Instagram, it's at Is This Adulthood. And on Twitter, it is at ITA_podcast. And my Instagram is at Ryan Durgy, RyanDurgy. And Twitter is the same.
And for myself, follow me on Instagram at Taylor Blix, TaylorBlixt. If you still do Facebook, and you're an old person like me, also shoot me a message on there too. So thanks, Ryan, and I'm looking forward to the next time. Hopefully Ruby will be back with us. We'll have some, I know we kind of have some interesting topics lined up in the way. So yeah, everyone, viewers, wait for that. And I'm excited to see you next.
Me too. All right, everyone, have a great day. Bye.
Woo.